Is the Aidan Mahaney commitment UConn's last? You're Locked On UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side and is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free in the App Store or Google Play. Well, let's dive right in. We bring back UConn men's basketball beat reporter from the Harfrod Courant, Joe Arruda. Joe, is this commitment from Aidan Mahaney UConn's last dip into the transfer portal?
Well, Mark, thanks for having me back on. It feels like it is for now. Obviously, Alex Karaban's decision, the deadline for that is May 29th. So I could see if he decides to come back, I could see them going and maybe grabbing an international player like Yaron Hassan or Apostolos Rumaglu to fill that last spot. Hurley's, if he comes back and they have 12 scholarships, Hurley has said in the past that he's fine with that. He doesn't need to fill up all of his scholarship spots. But I do see them potentially adding an international type like that can help with practice, maybe sort of a long shot to contribute that can develop or whatever and stay in the program. If Karaban doesn't come back, they might go add another piece. I'm not quite as sure on that. I think maybe it's kind of set, it feels like now. Is probably the right answer, but yeah, we'll have to see. That May 29th deadline is going to be something to look forward to.
Okay. The you mentioned an international player. Is Apostolos? Do you think he's if everything goes the way it's supposed to? With me, I shouldn't say it's supposed to, but if it goes the way most people believe, and Alex Karaban does come back, does Apostolos potentially come back, or is he looking to find a spot where he can get some playing time?
I think there's a chance. I haven't talked to him, so it's hard to say, but we'll talk with Coach Hurley tomorrow on campus, and we'll get more clarity on sort of what they're going for and if they are going to add another piece, what that piece will be. So that news will come out tomorrow from Hurley and see what he's looking for and what they're thinking. I'm not exactly sure about Apostle's situation, but he might want to go play somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think that's. I mean, I hope he. I shouldn't say I hope he does. I think if whatever is best for him, if he feels like he can come back and feels comfortable at UConn, and it's something that makes sense, then do it. But I know the staff would probably wish him well. Obviously, if he decides to go someplace else. Well, you just kind of teased potentially some news tomorrow. So you wrote an article that appeared yesterday in the Harfrod Courant. Why transfer Aidan Mahaney decided to leave St. Mary's, enjoying UConn's bid for the three-peat. Can you take us into his visit? First off, if anyone's watching this and they haven't checked out Joe's article, please check it out. It's well written. It's a really nice piece, introspective on why this kid decided to jump in the portal. Talk to us about kind of the whole day and everything that went into it.
Yeah, well, his decision to go in the portal, I wrote that it was harder for him to leave St. Mary's than it was for him to choose UConn. This is a kid that has lived in the Bay Area since he was 2 years old, born in New York, moved out there. His dad's from DC, was a Georgetown fan growing up. But yeah, he has roots in the community. He's lived there forever. He lives 20 minutes away from the St. Mary's campus. He's known Randy Bennett since he was in second grade,
Right.
Played with his son in high school, won a state championship in high school. There's a lot of kids that look up to him in that area. He does camps for them and everything like that. So that decision was hard for him, but he wanted something new. He wanted to sort of spread his horizons. He just happened to spread them all the way across the country. So yeah, I think that was, an interesting part of the whole dynamic. And there's more of that, in that story that you mentioned. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had a question about that specifically because you think California kids, you think maybe laid back, is there, there's a kind of a generalization or a stigma that comes with being like a California kid. Right. So in that respect, what I loved about the article and what you pointed out was how both Aiden and his father, Mark, great name, by the way, said, talked about how non-laid back the entire staff was, and how some coaches that he went and saw were prided themselves in being laid back. Talk to me about that. That to me was one of the most stark differences that you see from a Dan Hurley, Kamani Young, and Luke Murray staff.
Yeah, so that was what really stood out to me from my conversation with Mark, was just how impressed they were with the UConn staff, because they didn't let up. They ran through this 15-minute film session, um, and which could have taken an hour or maybe longer elsewhere, but they were just firing. They had all the attention to detail. They pointed out a million different things on the screen and asked him, tried to get him to picture himself in that situation, within UConn system essentially. Um, so yeah, I think that was very impressive to them, and his dad was super excited to talk about just what it was like, and he was very impressed with how intellectual it was, but at the same time, like you mentioned, just sort of how how intense it was. And
Yeah.
I think that stuff is especially impressive when there's two trophies sitting in the room and four more downstairs, and it doesn't hurt when there's 11 on the other side either.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty evident the type of culture they've really cultivated, and honestly, stories like yours are very important to continue to not necessarily spread the word, if you will, but it's really important for people to understand why this staff takes the time it does. But also, they had another recruit, Kobe Brea, in town, who I'm sure they did something very similar in that respect, to kind of rip through film sessions to understand if this kid is the type of kid that they want to be in their system. Ultimately, the commitment went to Aiden, so I think that kind of goes to show the attention to detail and the strategy that they put into these visits. It's not just a get to know you, if you will.
Yeah, the thing about this staff is now it feels like it has that blueprint. They know
Mhm.
what they're looking for. They know what spots they want to fill and what roles they need to fill. And so, yeah, I think Mahaney fits well into that blueprint. And I think part of it was shown on that visit where he's a guard, he's a point guard, he has to make decisions, and they were getting him to make decisions before them. So yeah, I think he's going to be a good piece.
No, absolutely. Mark posed this question. It wasn't more of a question; it was kind of a wondering. I'm gonna ask your opinion. It's kind of a silly one. He said, "Those guys are just," and I'm quoting from your article. I don't know how much caffeine they drink. If you had to guess the amount of caffeine, like what's their drink? Like, what do you think, Dan? If you know, tell us. But like, what's Dan Hurley's coffee drink to get him going?
Well, he drinks this mushroom blend coffee,
Oh yeah, that's right.
and he drinks a couple cups a day, and during games and before before games and during games. So yeah, I mean, there's plenty of caffeine going through their systems. You see all of his caffeine crashes on Twitter. So um,
I'm
yeah,
gonna have to I'm gonna have to get with Dan Hurley's people. I've found this, and I won't talk about it on the podcast because they don't sponsor the podcast, but I definitely have a secret ingredient that I think could help them with their caffeine crashes. So we could talk about that off air. Aiden's fit at UConn. We're gonna talk about that and like what his comp is coming up after this. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, we're back with Joe Arruda. I had Tobias Bass from The Athletic on yesterday, and he's a huge proponent in the way UConn has navigated its portaling. How would you grade the fit of Aiden with UConn right now?
I don't know what scale to use, but I think he fits well. I think he fills some of the roles that are missing, and they've been high on him since they played him. He's the top of the scouting report for that second round game 2 years ago or last year. Um, and yeah, I think he fills needs. He can He can play make. He can shoot. I think he can get rebounds. So yeah, I think he fits well. If I had to grade him, I'd probably say like an A. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know how to
that's
grade
fine.
him.
These are hypothetical questions, so there's no wrong answers, right? So I love that. A is a good grade. A for Aiden. We love that.
Sure.
I heard this I believe it was the director of scouting for 24/7. He did an interview talking about this commitment, talking about how Hurley and his staff look at Aiden as the type of player whose numbers are going to get higher in their system because they offer a more complex system that is going to give them more open shots. But I actually have a different take. I don't think that they're going to care if his numbers are around the same because I don't think of him as a Cam Spencer kind of hotspot, where Cam was great at, top of the key, free throw line extended on the left side. Those were kind of areas that Luke Murray showed him how great of a shooter he was there. I think he's going to be more of the Tristan Newton replacement, which Tristan wasn't a volume shooter, but he's who we went to in crisis, right? When no one was shooting well against Kansas, when, the shot clock is winding down, a lot of times Tristan's on the floor, he's taking those shots. Do you agree with that? Do you think he's more of a Tristan Newton replacement, or do you think he's a little more Cam Spencer? What are your thoughts?
I would say he's more Newton. I would agree with you there. I think, just because he can do more, like Tristan he led the team in assists. He led the team in rebounds for most of the year. Obviously
Right.
Donovan was out for a lot of the year, but I think Mahaney has more of a chance to pick up where those spots kind of drop off. The guard spot is smaller now. There's not 6'6" Tristan Newton, and Mahaney's not 6'6", but he's taller than Emmanuel and he's taller than Hassan Diarra. So yeah, I think you could see those numbers. I don't know if the scoring numbers will particularly go up. 13.9 points a game seems, it'd be pretty good on the way UConn runs. But the 2.6 and the rebounds and the assists, I think those numbers could go up.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring this up because in Aiden's fit with UConn, I think as someone that's been around this team, what do you say to pundits who don't really understand, still to this day, after back-to-back titles, that Dan Hurley has created a culture of competition where when you bring people in, the best players play?
Yeah, it's the best players play, and every player contributes. That's what their system is, and it's really what makes a good player with this system is someone that's willing to buy into the system. It's people that are willing to not force shots, that are willing to pass the ball a million times, that are willing to run off screens and set screens. And I think Mahaney is capable of doing all those things, and I think he wants to do all those things. That was part of his decision to come to UConn. Is he wanted to push himself. He wanted to dive more into his game and figure out what he's got. And I think the way that UConn runs pretty much everything, it gives each player a chance to contribute in multiple different ways. He's not just going to be a shooter. He's not just going to be a passer or whatever. He's going to be involved, all over the place. And I think that's what's made UConn so good is they've been able to find guys like that are willing to buy in.
No, and you kind of gave me a nice segue into my next question, which is, I think some of the players that were in the recruiting class last year, the 4 sophomores that have been left behind, including the 3 more wing players, Solomon Ball, Jalen Storrs, and Jaden Ross, they could have easily have jumped in this portal and found a spot where they could get 25, 30, 40 minutes a game someplace else. You mentioned that all these guys have bought into the process. Most programs lose a Solomon Ball or a Jalen Storrs when they bring in guys like Liam McNeely in as a freshman, when they bring in an established player like Aidan Mahaney. Is this special sauce that he's created this camaraderie that they don't want to leave, or is it the titles, like mixture of it all? Like what's your thought on quote unquote the special sauce of UConn retaining its players?
I think it's a mixture of it all. It's hard to leave, after winning a title, and especially when there's a chance for you to make your mark and step into a bigger role. Looking at the roster now, it's kind of deep. It's getting pretty deep. So, maybe those guys, maybe Solo Ball doesn't get the minutes that he wants, and maybe, whatever happens from there. But, they have a chance to compete, and they're all going to be involved in some way or another. So yeah, I mean, I think those guys, it'll be interesting to see what Jaden Ross can do and what he can contribute, what minutes he finds for himself. But Jalen Stewart should be a huge, piece, and Solo could be a, seventh man or sixth man, depending on how he develops.
Yeah. Do you I get my biggest wild card for this season next year is Jaden Ross. 6'7". Some people list him at 6'8". The type of wingspan he has. Solo is 6'4", but he's got we've had people call him Go-Go Gadget arms because his wingspan is ridiculous. 45-inch vertical leap. They have pieces that other teams don't like, and these guys may not see the floor the majority of the time. I don't even know if there's a question there. It's just they're just a wild card. I think it's great that they're coming back because I feel like they can develop in this system. And if there's more trust that you should put in, if there's any trust you should put in a staff, it's a staff that's won back-to-back titles, looking to do something someone hasn't done since UCLA in 67 to 73. So yeah, I think we're going to find out more about this program and these players as time goes on. All right, Joe, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube for free on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, we'll dare to talk about projected rotations and starting lineups after this coming up. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that. But there is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers. You can trade with your friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constant changes with tournaments and challenges. A ton include their unique mini games like digging for treasure, and there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. All right, we're back with Joe Arruda. Joe, I don't know if you've been on UConn Twitter or you really pay attention to this stuff about projecting lineups, but I love to cause chaos. So anybody that's listening to this, do not get mad at Joe for his projected starting lineups because that's what we're going to do right now. Who's your projected starting lineup without an Alex Karaban return?
Without Alex? All right. I think Ahmad Noel is going to earn the starting point guard spot, and I don't think Hassan Diarra. I think he likes his role. But that's my opinion, so we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Aidan Mahaney, I think he could step in at the 2, and I think he'll be an important piece there. And then I'll put Liam McNeely at the 3 and Jalen Stewart at the 4 if Karaban doesn't come back, with Samson Johnson at the 5.
Wow, I like it. I don't know if I disagree with any of that. That's a shame because I would have loved to have debate on that. I do think, I'd give you one caveat on this because I do agree that I think Ahmad Noel earns the starting lineup, starting nod eventually. But could you see a start to the year where Hassan is getting the starting nod and then it changes? Or do you think that Dan doesn't play around like that? You think it's it's earned during the year? Because he really doesn't like to mess with his lineup. I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, if Hassan Diarra was starting the first game, would I be surprised? A little bit, but not really.
Right.
He's still got room to get better, and you saw how much better he got, from last year to I get confused when I say last year, this year, all that stuff, but from his first season to his second.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he was so good in that 6-man role, and he worked so well. He brought that energy off the bench. He was another defender. I think Ahmad obviously is a higher rated prospect. He's got a higher ceiling, but Hassan has experience. He's an important addition not only for on the court but for off the court. The kid, he's a leader and he knows what it takes to win. Obviously, he's won it twice. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it would be. I don't expect that to happen, but I wouldn't be absolutely shocked if it did.
Yeah, no, I think kind of putting a little pin in that is an interesting one, because now that he's back, there's no like, well, if Hassan comes back, it's a different story. Like, I also think it was your article during the parade, or like around that same time, where Dan kind of dropped a little nugget of having these honest conversations with the returning players. And, Hassan was one of the guys. Like, are you going to have the similar role? Do you want it to be expanded? And like, do you know if those conversations have happened, or does it feel like they've likely come to an agreement considering Hassan is back?
Yeah, I'm sure they happened. Yeah. I mean, he said the same thing that Hurley did. He said, we're going to have to talk,
Yeah.
about what I want, about what they want. And yeah, I mean, I would be very shocked if Hassan walked into the office and demanded to be a starter. That would be something that would blow
Yeah.
that would blow my mind. But yeah, I mean, they definitely have talked. They know each other as brothers on the staff. They're very close.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think they both kind of had an idea of what each other was looking for. And Hurley might have convinced him to accept that 6-man role, which he might have accepted already anyway. So that's still a little bit that needs to be cleared up, and I plan on asking Hurley about that tomorrow and getting more into that. Why he decided to come back, and if he ever even thought about leaving.
I love it. All right, let's do one more. What's your projected starting lineup with Alex Karaban returning?
Sub Jalen Stewart for Karaban, and go
That's
with
it, huh?
Noel, Mahaney, McNeely, Karaban, Johnson.
Is there a thought? And again, this is my only thing: is Jalen Stewart has shown he's a proven in quotation marks. When he was called upon, he proved he could play. Now, Liam McNeely obviously is a McDonald's All-American, a phenomenal player. I think my only switch is that I think Jalen starts at the 3 and Karaban the 4, or however you want to do it, one or the other. I think you start Karaban side by side, and I think Liam's your first guy off the bench. First forward off the bench. I think, obviously, if you have Ahmad as the starting point guard with Haas, I think that rotation is there. And then obviously, it's a deep team. Like, there's no, I don't think there's a wrong answer. Like, that's the
thing.
beauty.
Yeah, I don't think you could go wrong there either. McNeely is, I've seen him play in person a couple times. The kid is legit.
Yep.
And I think he'll
He
come
sure
in,
is.
and I think he'll earn that spot. That's a position where, maybe like you mentioned with Noel and Hassan, maybe Jalen starts at the beginning of the year and they go from there. But I'd be shocked to not see McNeely in the starting lineup at some point, and going into March, as the season winds down.
How about this? Can we see a crazy lineup where, again, I've heard this. Someone mentioned this last time I did the pod. It might have been Tobias. Samson Johnson really performed well as a guy off the bench as well. Could you see a similar formula where they bring in Terrace Reed and they feel really good with him at the center at the 5 to start? He's a bigger kid, doesn't get in as much foul trouble as Samson does, and then have Samson play almost like a split minutes. I also feel like there's going to be a 3-headed monster with Youssef. So I'm curious, like, what's your initial thought on that potential rotation?
I think it'll be split. I think it'll be, they'll be similar, in terms of playing time. It's not going to be, like Adama and Donovan. I think it's going to be closer to Donovan and Samson. Not as far as production, but as far as minutes. And I think Terrace, he has a lot more to show, that he didn't show at Michigan. He's a good defender. He's a big-bodied, physical player down low, kind of more similar in that sense to Sanogo. But obviously Sanogo was an automatic scorer and, could provide a lot of other things. So yeah, I mean, I could see them splitting time, especially like you mentioned, the foul trouble. That'll be something that both of them have to work on going into the year. But yeah, and then Sagari is interesting because, he has some work to do, to earn his spot on the court. But he's also a vibes guy. He's a locker room guy that they all love.
Yeah.
And, I could see him, upping his minutes to be a bit of a contributor. I don't see him being, a guy that keep on the court for 5 minutes at a time or anything like that. But yeah, I could see him coming in as a contributor.
I love it. The 2023 title team was deeper, right? It was, touching 10 players deep. How do you envision the 24-25, the team that we're about to watch this coming season? Is that about the same? I feel like it's got to be, right? I think we're going to be touching with Alex. Let's say Alex Garabin comes back. If not, the max 9 players deep. I mean, I feel like that's what we're looking at, correct?
Yeah. It feels like that. They've doubled up on each position like they've done in both of the last years. And, there's opportunities for guys that we haven't even mentioned on this show yet. Isaiah Abraham, who's coming in.
That's right. Yeah.
Who's another versatile forward. Him and Jaden Ross have a chance to each sort of duke it out for those minutes. I think there's plenty of options all over the place. Like I said, they doubled up. They've been doubling up on positions. And, if those guys can step up and be playable, like Coach likes to say, then I think they're in a good spot.
All right, I'm gonna throw you a curveball. This is something that I'm doing this personally. So if you want to mention this to Dan Hurley as an aside, as something silly, you should definitely do this. I am doing something fun whenever I go to the gym, and I'll be doing it in about an hour. Is if there's an open gym, I try to shoot half court shots just like he does, right? But since it's now a 3-peat, I come up with a game. All right. So it's the Dan Hurley half court challenge game, and you play it kind of like golf. So if you miss your shot, you have to rebound it. And wherever you rebound it, that's where you shoot your next shot. So that's once you get it in the goal, that's your score. So if you make a half court shot, it's like getting a hole in one. If you make 3 shots in a row from half court, you automatically, the game's over. It's kind of like a walk-off golf, like, a match play situation. If you'd like to mention that to Dan Hurley, feel free. I think it's hysterical.
All right, I'll try. I'll try to remember all the rules.
I mean, just say I was just on a crazy podcast where this guy does a half court challenge like you, and it's kind of like the scores like golf, and see if he's interested.
I'll tell you, man, if you hit 3 half court shots in a row, maybe you should be on campus.
Yesterday I almost made 3, so it was a good day. I've made 2. That's been documented on Twitter. 3 is tough, man. You hit that second one, you start getting a little nervous. I'll tell you that. But man, listen, I appreciate you coming on. Stay with me as I close this out. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports of today with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now and available on the free Fire TV channels app. Before I close this out, Joe, tell everybody where they can find you. Obviously, we have your X handle on the screen here, but for those that are listening, where can they find you? And also, your articles in the Harfrod Courant. Just give it to us all.
Yeah, so you mentioned it. X is on the screen. Joe Arruda 9 created that a long time ago. Yeah, then the current.com, COURANT.com. You can find all of our stuff on the Harfrod Courant. We've got, we got an awesome legendary columnist, sports writer of the year, Dama More, and then, an incredible women's writer as well, Emily Adams. So we got plenty of stuff on there to keep you guys in the loop with UConn.
Love it, man. I love what you guys do. And the best to the beat staff, if you will. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. For Joe Arruda, I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked in, stay connected, make sure your toughness meter is always rising. And as always, go Huskies.